Hello.
Hello.
This is our Pedagogic Dialogy podcast number 8. Can you believe that?
Wow.
On open topic or let's say topic of your own choice of your own questions, comments. And here we have, it's also unusual thing, 3 of us at the moment. It's Eugene, who you met before in all the podcasts, Eugene Matusov. Then it's David. What's your last name, David? Garcia. He just came from Spain 2 days ago and will be here the whole semester with us. And my name is Anna Marjanovic Shane. And we are all in some ways engaged in dialogic pedagogy. So we probably will have people joining us as the...
We have actually 3 minutes. So
okay.
Before.
Okay, but this will be recorded, right?
This is recording.
Yes.
I hope.
Yes. So if you join and you see there is nothing much going on, just write.
What do you mean? We will start.
Yeah.
There are 3 of us.
Yeah, we can talk.
Yeah, in Russian it says 2 person is company, 3 person is crowd.
It's crowd.
Crowd,
Right.
yeah.
So we have crowd here.
Yeah, we are crowd.
Yes. And so we will maybe start and people will join us. So
Yes.
what's on your mind, Anna?
Well, on my mind is something that I've been thinking for a while, how to understand actually what kind of things are going on in dialogue that's different from, let's say, meaning making as described by Piaget or by Vygotsky or by many cognitive theories.
Okay, what's on your mind, David?
Well, actually, I'm right now like, okay, good question. I don't know what to say.
No, but what's on your mind? Like, not in response to Anna.
No, but right now I am absorbed by Anna's.
Okay.
Well, on my mind, it's actually very kind of also pragmatic things. Not also, just pragmatic things. Mikhail Gradovsky from Norway and Anna and I were working on the book that's called Bakhtin by and for educators. And we just finished one chapter about, we interviewed a lot of people who kind of were, we call self-proclaimed Bakhtinian educators, practitioners. And we interviewed about their practice and so forth. But one thing that we just finished working on the chapter about like Bakhtinian pedagogy in conventional institutions, like all of that. And this is not on my mind because it's done.
Yes.
What on my mind is what we're going to do next, which is next chapter supposed to discuss, initially it was called like dialogic methodology, but we thought that the word methodology is anti-dialogic in itself. It's coming from positivist idea. So we right now tentatively call that chapter as dialogic research craft, we call it. Craft. It's like we're more comparing
Art and craft.
like art and craft. Like when you writing a novel, you decide to work on novel, on a story. You will not say, what's my methodology of writing a novel? Although you can, somebody later can discover some method maybe, but this is not how the writers think about that. They say craft. Right?
Craft.
It's very different. That difference between science and religion is based on idea of method of investigation. That
Comes from Descartes, maybe.
Many, not Descartes contribute to that by focusing on method. You know, the whole thing was called method. But it's not only, the whole discussion was about that. So the difference between religion and science is about method. And there are many people who contributed to that, like there is some guy, what his name is, from Austria. He came with this idea of falsification.
Popper.
Karl Popper, thank you. But many others. So the idea is to kind of not so much criticize that stuff, although that's probably important, but move forward and develop dialogic ideas about research doing.
Actually, I'm very interested, if I may, on that, because now I was trying to think of my thesis as a polyphonic novel,
Mhm.
trying to, but
Oh, that's very interesting.
but I can do kind of can imagine how to do it in the results, how to
Mhm.
narrate it, think about the results, about the narration.
Mhm.
But exactly, how do I do the methodology part?
But again, first of all, it's better not to call it, because as soon
Yeah,
as
sure.
I call methodology, it's in my view, it colonizes that, because this is not.
Hey, we are back. We are back. We hope that it will be good this time. To just briefly repeat, we are on our Dialogic Pedagogy Live podcast number 8, and there is Eugene, David, and Anna. We started to discuss something when we froze, so can we restart at least a little bit?
But
Okay, you should have now that.
no, but
I
since you
am.
get there's you know what? I think you know what we should not wait. We just should continue, and whatever
Right.
happen will happen. Because we already almost 3 minutes, nothing happens. Okay, so tell us about your project and why you what is your polyphonic research? Aha, hi Alex. Oh, thanks
Hi.
God. Alex join us. Hi. Okay, we will just start talking about, I don't know how much you missed that. There is 2 topics so far we were entertaining. One is about something about meaning making, dialogic meaning making, non-dialogic meaning making, and idea of dialogic research. What's dialogic research is about. So what's on your mind, Alex? So feel free to write, and we will discuss whatever on your mind. So far, David making kind of decision for us, yes, which is good, to discuss maybe dialogic research.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I try to access the meaning-making process of 5 students that share their experience.
Mm-hmm.
And from, as I see it from a dialogical point of view, I have to be very careful about offering myself their meaning making. One of the things that I try to avoid it is they are the ones collecting their own data. It's not me, it's them. And I am one of the participants also in the research context. But the thing is how to develop an analysis and how to talk about what it's in a positivist way should be talk methodology. How to talk about that in a dialogic way, because I can think on the results. I can think on the how to write the results as a narration, but the analysis and the explanation of how I did it, it's very controversial for me. It's very complicated to think about it in a dialogic way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me share about some both literature experiences or reading something about what I would consider interesting in dialogic, and also about my own research experiences, what I consider to be dialogic in these terms. And sorry that I have to turn around because I feel that there are 4 people here.
Yes,
one
we are 4 here.
There are 3 of us and the camera.
And you.
Yeah.
And the camera you. So that's why I have to turn around. Yeah, Alex says it's fine. Okay. Good. So let me say from the literature, because I think the first time I started thinking about that, more coming from literature rather than my own experiences. So my own experiences, research experience, inspired by that. And by literature, actually, I mean not necessarily literature, but also multimedia. So I would say for me, the most interesting dialogic research from the point of view research making, dialogic research making in education was done by Joseph Tobin and his colleagues. And so he did a very interesting study, actually 2 studies that I'm talking about specifically. One was called Preschool in 3 Cultures, and another kind of, it's called 3 Cultures, Preschool in 3 Cultures Revisited. which is he kind of repeated the research 20 years after. In this research, and it's interesting because I talked with Joe about that, how he was doing that. And what's interesting was that they planned to do traditional research. And at some point, the traditional research collapsed for them. So what they plan to do, they plan to videotape preschools, right? Find some interesting patterns and publish about that. Even to do some statistics about that. Instead of what they come to that, and again, I talked with Joe, but I still, I really encourage him to write a paper about that, just historical paper, how it was done, how he came to that idea. Because what he finished up, or they finished up, is they pick up interesting pieces in these videos, and they ask people from their own culture to explain why the hell they're doing that. First of all, they want to know, is it aberration, which means, is it like strangely bizarre experience, or maybe it's even failure to do something. They're trying to do one thing, but something else happened, right? Is it good and bad? And is it bad, why is it bad? And how it should be good? Or is it, if it's good, why is it good? They did that, and then they were so shocked because with some things, I can give examples if you want to. They're so much shocked that they start sharing it with educators from these three cultures and to ask their explanations about that or their observations about that. What's interesting, again, let me give examples. Like, for example, one example, probably maybe one of the most attractive for at least United States, but probably for China as well, this observation on Japanese preschool. There is a situation when there is a child who is like 4, 5 years, who is, looks like rambunctious behavior, like very, for example, at some point kids are working on their projects, individual projects, and he finished that project earlier, and he started telling jokes about that. They use crowns, for example. I think he has black crown, so he stood up, pointed, put his next to his genitalia and said, "Look, I have black penis." Right. And kids, of course, it's very amusing to them. A teacher hearing that, but doing pretending that she's not even paying any attention, just continue doing what she's doing. In another place, the kids, he's hitting a child, another boy, and hitting rather like with strongly. And what's going on that the boy is crying, a girl came to this boy, putting them aside, asking what happened. There is a group of the other kids around that, and they listen very carefully narration of this boy, what's happened. And at the end, this girl was saying, "Well, you know that Hiro, I think his name is Hiroki. You know, it's always happened with Hiroki. You better not to play with him to avoid that." But then it's even more what's happened. The teacher called kids to clean up, and kids start cleaning up the cards, the play, and that Hiroki come pick up these cards, that some kind of game from some game, and throwing them from the balcony on the street. When the child comes to the teacher,
girl came to the teacher,
complain about that, the teacher said, "Why are you telling it to me? Do something about that." Okay, when my students, when I show that video to my students, they always, when they hit other boy, they always like that, guts, like that happen. And my students always write, "This is abuse." Like they really start criticizing teacher, not doing anything. And even when the teacher says that, "Why you're telling it to me?" So when they show that to Japanese and American educators, they're very much criticizing and shocked, slightly for different reasons. There is some difference between Chinese and American, but not much about that. But when they show to Japanese educators, and not only from that, initially they thought maybe this is the people who actually they're even praising the behavior. They thought maybe it's because they're defensive. You know, they don't want to admit how bad it is. But they show to the other to other preschool, other educators, completely different even city, and they're praising that. And it's interesting because the values very different. And reverse thing, when the best interpersonal conflict solving American preschool actually criticized in Japanese. I'm from American. My students love this incident, and they couldn't understand why the Japanese would criticize that. So, in my view, this is creates this dialogic research in a sense that it's first of all you hear it focuses on the interesting tensions that one culture usually picks up about another culture, and there is different explanations of that, which invites readers or since it's a video, also the viewers, yes, to notice things that maybe sometimes not invisible for the Geotobin participants, or maybe noticeable, but they come with a different angle to discuss that. So there are many layers there. I can talk about many more about this kind of research. I try to do that similar things that with Kathy von Dirk, we videotape teachers in innovative school and some interaction with the kid. Again, many things emerged from, we were not thinking in advance about that, but what we did, we videotape, there are certain things attracted our attention. We were sitting with the teacher and asked teacher to explain what the teacher thought about that, and then brought our, the teacher asked, why it's attracted your attention, and we were talking about that. So it was back and forward between us and the teacher discussing these different things that we observed. We also asked teacher, they showed the whole thing and asked what attracted teacher's attention, and asked why it's attracted your attention, and again talking back and forward. In another research with actually René de Palma, your person who actually lives in the Galicia, and Mark Smith, we studied innovative school here about how they transition to conventional school. We did observations and we showed them a draft of our research report and make a presentation about that in the community with parents, teachers, and children. And some children disagree with our interpretation, and we included that disagreement and our reply to that disagreement. For us, it's not verification whether or not we're correct or not correct, but it's part of the dialogue about what it is, which we invite the readers to think about that as well, how they think about it.
So it looks to me like, from the research point of view, what is your problem when you talk about how to report the results or the narration? Where do you see that falls apart for you?
In the difficulty to enter in dialogue with the participants. I try, I can perform the whole investigation with them, the whole research with them. But what I can do is to take some interpretations from mine and share it with them. But I already did that once, and one of the participants couldn't meet with me. So that for me is a problem because I don't have his view. And also, another problem is the fear that my interpretation changes a lot from this conversation, and I am unable to share it a lot again with them. So I am very artificial about the results.
Why not maybe think about how your interpretation was before and changes after as part of the whole reporting on what happened, because this change is important, because for you the meaning changes in this investigation. I had some similar idea a long time ago and I never realized it.
Can I actually interrupt just real quickly? This is what actually Joe Tobin, why they switched them, because initially they wanted, now remember it comes back to me, they wanted to check their interpretation with their participants. And instead of, it was not the checking, but they suddenly realized that what they thought as a data was provocation for dialogue.
Yeah.
And what was become so-called data, it
Was
became
dialogue.
what's dialogue itself.
It's actually a research tool that creates information, creates notes.
It's not even tool; it's more provocation. What
Yes.
it's actually this is actually Joe Tobin talked about as a provocation,
Mhm.
and I would say it's dialogic provocation. So what videos they collected and what attracted their attention become provocation for the
Yeah.
participants to talk about that.
So instead of thinking that you're going to find the truth about some reality,
Mhm.
data, which means like this is reality, now I just have to understand this reality and like directly, so I'll take all these points of view to better triangulate or whatever you want. Instead of thinking essentializing that, you're actually engaging in dialogue as one part of one participant, and then reporting on all these different points of view, including your own, because it looks to you like that, but having it open that somebody else's point of view could capture things that you couldn't. In other words, there is no one essential there.
Yes.
Because we are about human sciences, what's essential is exactly this process of how we and why we see things from one way to another and how we change our opinion.
One thing that I changed is to be I thought it's to be very clear about this research is not an endpoint.
Yeah.
This is not an endpoint. Another for me also, it is very important that for the 5 main participants that I understand, me myself, I am a participant, but for that the reporting of the results is interesting or is appealing for these 5 participants, so they can engage in dialogue later. This
And this is a good point. In a sense, think about that. When we say report, I think the word report is wrong also.
Yeah.
Because in a way, like think about that. Who is participants in Joe Tobin research? In my view, I'm participant. I'm a reader.
Yes.
And I'm a teacher who actually using that his state for the students. My students are research participants.
We're all.
Joe Tobin doesn't even know. Like, what does it mean findings of his research? Its findings now becomes whatever we found. Like, for example, I was giving him interesting findings that it's not in his book. And because up to certain time in the United States, when I showed the video, my students start predictably responding to something that they never responded to before. It means there is something changed in American culture that now, and when I told Joe, he said, wow. But he wrote this thing in, the whole book was written at the end of 80s, but the change happened in second part of 90s. So you see, people continue to, and I can you give specific example? In American preschool in Joe Tobin tape, the kids are engage in activity of doing soup, real soup. And they were using 4-year-old kids knives, real knives. And suddenly my students start challenging that. They say this is child abuse. You should not give knives to that young kids. But it means the culture changed. I started asking before it was fine.
Yeah.
But again, so what's the finding? The findings that my students found.
Your students, yes.
My students found.
As readers, as viewers.
Yes. So in a way, the text should be written in a way that invite findings from the readers. And this is what it means they're not finalized.
Yes.
The people will continue working that. But it should allow that happen. And it's not easy because like Joe Tobin, he never wrote about knives, anything. Because it was invisible. It was in the video. He never even discussed because it's invisible for him. Like for it was invisible for Chinese educators, for Japanese educators, for American educators, and for them as researchers was invisible. But it became visible
in
when
the 2000s.
Yes, in the 2000s. Not
For
2000s.
the American
Late
students.
90s. Late 90s.
That is very interesting. Yes, it's right about right in a not finalized way. That will be.
So this is why I think we talked before we started this podcast about different points of view. Remember, you were saying fish in the water does not see the water. That this having all these possibilities to be outside and inside, both are important. The ones who doesn't see and the ones who see, to encounter each other and to see the practice. What I wanted to say is I had this unbaked idea when I was in the 90s going to some acting classes to tape, and I taped at that time these acting classes, and I had an idea. I did it only with two people, to have them watch themselves in this little exercise of acting, and then discuss what's happening there with everybody else. So what happened, I abandoned it because I didn't have technology, and it became too complicated for me at that time, because everybody then started jumping with this. So many different ideas what's going on with this actor, but the only result was that in the next time when this person tried to do that scene, they changed completely. So I couldn't conceptualize at that time.
And I think you couldn't because you're focusing on monologic idea of research.
At that time,
Yeah,
yes.
that time. Because you're trying to find
Essence, yes,
yes,
exactly.
essence, exactly.
But I still, my first move was to see like how somebody would look back and what they would say, but I didn't have.
By the way, and this is very important, in each time we were doing this research, dialogic research, including Joe Tobin, what's happened is nothing to do with proposal of the research, nothing to do. Like we were with Kathy Banduk, we were focusing on initially on how teachers make decision making, how it mediates decisions, and whatever. But it ended up completely different things, because what happened was that the teacher asked kids to do, it was a math activity, and they asked, the teacher asked to do, to solve very interesting open-ended question problem for the kids to divide $1 among 3 friends. And the thing is that one girl, and actually not one girl, there were some other kids as well, but the teacher killed their germs of ideas. But this girl developed completely the full idea, aesthetic approach to solving math problems. And all the teacher's questions didn't make any sense to the girl. And for the whole way of approaching. It's just like, because he's trying to do the conventional mathematical way, and she's trying to do it through the aesthetics, like for symmetry. He actually did a flower. By the way, we don't know it. It's teacher's language. Create a flower out of coins. And many problems that he asked her, like what to do with one, you cannot divide evenly between friends, right? But for her, it was not a problem because it was part, that coin was in the middle of the flower, what the teacher called flower.
It's not reminder, it's just the center of the whole
the holding everything together. And the interesting thing is why teacher did not, what you can see the teacher completely puzzled, but the teacher did not follow to this girls and trying to constantly impose his ideas. So that's become interesting exploration, like why the teacher doing that? Unfortunately, we didn't interview the girl. And when we tried to interview her, she said, I don't remember. Because it was so situated, her decision, so solution, that she couldn't remember how she came to that, what it was. Because we came to the dialogic idea like several weeks after. It was too late. Like for Joe Tobin, it was not late. But for us, it was too late when we came to that. But in many ways, the same was with René de Palma and Max Smith. It's our proposal, what we plan to do, is completely different what happened. Exactly because what was interesting for people, what people found interesting, but not necessarily what we can foresee what might be interesting.
And it evolves. It starts with one interest, and then suddenly it moves you.
It's like what you're saying, but you abruptly ended.
You're right.
And because exactly like Joe Tobin participants were in themselves focusing on so many different things.
Right. Well, there were many reasons why I ended. I was not in an organized research, and technology was hard, and all kinds of things. So, but that was some germ of the idea.
But part of that, it's it's a real problem because it's going against this monologic research, which is heterodiscursia. There are so many different topics not interfere, but collide with each other. And as you said, they kind of not much to do with each other.
Yes, sometimes.
Is there a question there?
No, that's just in Russian says hello, and I say hello.
Yes.
This guy from Ukraine.
Okay, I see that probably Igor and Veronica are watching now, and there are more people because we see that there are 5. But what's on your mind?
Where do you see 5 people?
5 is here that they're watching.
That is,
Uh-huh.
okay. People, I see what is what on their minds. Somebody's saying,
somebody is angry there. Okay,
oh, angry. What is about? I think it's not anger. I thought it was like laugh. No?
There is laugh, but I also saw a angry hair.
Oh, whatever. So what, guys, you think? So can you write it down?
Send us a message.
I wish you were here. Yeah, send a message.
I will send one. This is now going to be my, see, one love.
Okay. So anything else? So this is what I was thinking, how we work with a chapter, how to articulate what kind of dialogic research.
And how, like, everything has to be changed because results is not what traditionally is taught as result of the scientific research. Like you come to some solid truth
Conclusion about,
and verify something and say, yes, this is like that. But the results are really dialogic in the sense that it changes everyone in a way, exactly what they even see or not see, what they notice and not notice, what they will do next time in a similar situation. It just is kind of a building block of your existence, as much as it is about continuing to think about some practices or relationship or whatever is the original focus.
And even like what does mean participate in this research changes, because for me what become interesting, what doesn't mean participate, it means to find interest in the something and notice something interesting and trying to reflect on that and communicate and also get in the dialogic contact with other people, what they think about that, and to connect to that what they observed and what you think about that, what the things noticed. And not for the focus or for the point of correctness, because conventional research is about like reliability, whether or not I'm correctly grasping. Correctness could be also part of this kind of research, but it's secondary. The most important part is not correctness, but it's about like what you think about that, what you noticed, why you think it's good or bad, or something else. How you make judge. So it's about authorial judgments, observations, authorial judgments, authorial replies, authorial addressing.
Right. It's not only finalizing in the sense that the truth is finalized, but who is doing the finalizing? Because everybody is. I'm thinking exactly of this book that we are writing. So we had many interviews and many points of view, and then we did a lot of analysis chapters of like how we think that people are thinking about, even when they are different, about let's say how to motivate the students to like subject matter that they should be teaching or not, or anything that how to make teaching alive, or whatever was the topic of various of our interviews at that moment. And when we do analysis in our analytic chapters, we are finalizing. We are making our own judgments based on what we talked about, and we have transcripts, or we go back to the interviews and say, aha, this is what I think this person thinking. Look, here
it's not so much thinking, no, what it means.
What it means, yes. What it means.
Because
exactly.
what the thinking, we can only guess, yes.
Yeah, we can but
guess. We can guess why this move is done, by what's desires behind that, maybe. Right?
So in a way, doing analysis is our public meaning making in dialogue with these people, with which they can agree or not agree, or partially agree, or add something to it, or like something like that. So
that for me, this is I would call dialogic finalizing, because it is finalizing in a way for invitation other people, readers in this particular case, and in some cases it may be participants, like two types of participants of the events, to respond to that as well. Like in our book, we plan to send our like semi-final draft of the book to participants whom we interviewed, and who participate in discussions and for their response to that.
Mm-hmm.
And we plan to include their responses in our book and reply to them as well. And by doing that, we're much more open space for the readers to join.
Right. So it's a really not research methodology from the point of view of enlightenment understanding of what's science, that you're a neutral observer without any prejudices, objective, kind of like you're looking from above at some phenomenon, and then you're just trying to have a very good view of that phenomenon. But the phenomenon itself is cannot be changed by just your observation. Of course, in experiments you can do things that change it, but as a phenomenon, it stays the phenomenon. But here we are talking with live people who we can't read their mind, as you say. We don't know what they're thinking. And everything that goes on is kind of returning to itself.
Yeah.
And matters because it's also the relationships. If you say to somebody like, I disagree with you, this could be taken in different ways. How that person will take that.
So in a way, the biggest if you think about outcomes of the research, it's not the kind of snapshot of reality, which is traditional positivistic research is about truth out there. But in my view, this is grounded dialogue. It could be about reality, not about some other things, about values, and so on and so forth. But that's a grounded dialogue that will come out of that. That I was thinking about Joe Tobin. What's he kind of producing? His research is never ending. It's continuous, and the findings are constantly coming up, and it will live forever in my view, because the more the time is changing. First of all, there is diversity of people who are looking at that, and they have different interests, different experiences, and so on and so forth. But plus, time is changing. It's like Bakhtin was making a joke, but it's not his original joke, that the most important thing that ancient Greeks didn't know about themselves, that they were Asian. They didn't know about that. But it's possible only for us to say that. And that's discovery, this is findings, that these Greeks, what we're talking about,
Ancient.
They were Asians.
So the outcomes that we were talking about that we could do is that it's open itself. That is a narration or a research that is open to future viewers or readers, right? But it's at the same time it has richness because it has different points of view in there, right? I think I am only re-saying what I think we were talking about.
Yes. Recasting that.
Yes, recasting that. Yeah. It's interesting. But yeah, sure.
No.
We
Do you
have
want
a
me to
question
interrupt?
over
Yeah,
there.
there is interesting. Alex make an interesting point. Thanks, Alex, for that. Let me read that for our group because other people can see that and read by themselves. The points of view are not all these people's own. They repeat standard phrases and ideology and culture. Can we, in dialogic sense, get behind this without leaving the persons exposed in essential and in dangerous way? Question mark. And in other words, how to do dialogue respond to oppressive ideologies such as fascism?
That's interesting.
Who wants to try to? And people feel free to reply to Alex as well for the writing. Who wants to talk about meanwhile?
Well, when you finish with this, how to make dialogue respond to oppressive ideologies such as fascism, of course, the dialogue is to a certain extent always a little bit risky, but very, very risky if you have oppressive government like fascism or any other totalitarianism like it was in Soviet Union or in Eastern Europe to various degrees. And I don't think that in that sense, dialogue can hide itself unless you just kind of among three friends who are very close and don't say anybody, but even that may be dangerous. So I don't know if that there is a going around that, but of course this is extreme situation. Or maybe not so extreme. I don't know.
In my view, the Bakhtin actually provides a very good answer to this kind of indirect way about fascism and Stalinism and communism, totalitarian communism. The thing is, you were talking, in my view, Alex, again from Bakhtinian glasses with Eugene accent about that. You're talking about like excessive monologism. Cliché is excessive monologism. Fascism is excessive monologism. But the cliché can exist without fascism.
Yeah.
They can exist by themselves. And in my view, this is a case of excessive monologism. There is kind of good news what Bakhtin, I think, passed to us. The good news is the only way to do excessive monologism to its end is either it's suicidal or homicidal. It's impossible to be alive with excessive monologisms to the end. And this is why it provides some hope, because it means the real dialogism exists under all these regimes of cliché. It survives under fascism. It's subversive. And so, by the way, when I say subversive, it's not necessarily subversive within political regime, which is true as well. Under fascism, totalitarianism, communism, it's subversive. But it's subversive in cliches as well.
Yes.
And it's kind of the goal of, if you want to, and I think you have some hidden goal, Alex, is to bring this dialogism out in people, or connect to them and yourself to that dialogism. And I think it's the kind of, since they are alive, it's possible, but not guaranteed, and can be difficult to do for whatever reasons. It could be under fascism. It could
people mask what they really think,
or they're not mask. It might be masking. It's much easier.
Yeah.
When it's cliche, actually, cliche is much bigger problem than when people suppress, when they have double thinking, like Orwell talking about it. When they say one thing, you're thinking about another thing, because they think another thing, and this is much easier to access to that another thing. But when they say cliché, it's close for them as well. And fascism, it could happen as well, that it's under that. And this is much more difficult to get to that. But on the other hand, since they're alive, it means that they have passion about certain things they like, certain things they dislike, and to that you can connect. Even their anger, even their bigotry has a life aspect. For me, it's always a good example is that essay that Hegel wrote about slavery. Why is it kind of interesting for me? Is because basically in that essay, Hegel was kind of philosophizing about like what does it mean ideal slave for the slave owner. And he found that the ideal slave for the slave owner, by the way, the ideal slave for slave owner is not who is obedient. That's very interesting. Why? Let's say I'm a slave owner and you're my slave. I'm ordered for you to do something that may be harmful for me, but it's invisible for me that it's harmful. But you can see that it's harmful. So ideal slave, Hegel said, would refuse to follow my command under threat of your own death. You should sacrifice your life for my well-being.
Save the master.
So basically what Hegel discovered, that even slavery, which is extremely distorted human relations, it's still human relations. It's still, as a slave owner, I'm actually lurking for real human connections with you, whom I will protect, whom I love me, who are willing to sacrifice your life for my real, genuine thing. Okay? So it's a human relations, but extremely distorted. But this is where you can connect to that humanity in that kind of things. And in my view, this is very interesting analysis, and I wish somebody did analysis from the fascism, or again, totalitarian communism, or cliche. When the cliche, there is, whatever cliches people using, there is some ontological rootness of that cliche, which has this dialogic and human nature that you can reconnect to that, or at least try to reconnect to that. Again, you cannot guarantee to that, but it's possible to reconnect.
What if we, Alex, if we turn your words onto the educational situation? What would in education be repeat standard phrases and ideology and culture and fascism? Isn't when students are expected to give the correct answer on a text, expected to give some cliche, whether they understand it or not, mean it or not, or isn't that a kind of like educational fascism then? Did you mean it like that?
Fascism. Or I would call it authoritarianism.
Authoritarianism.
Rather than fascism.
And then would under such, we live in the era when many schools are operating to some degree, maybe very gentle degree, on that premise. And if we then take this Hegelian thing, I think still many educators crave for this humanness and liveliness of the students' response.
Yep.
Even though
Many of them.
You still have to say 2 and 2 is 4.
In my view, what actually back to the minute making, in my view, the traditional school in many ways engage in this socialization of the students in certain discourses. It's like what J. Lemke wrote about talking science. The students not learn science; they learn talk science. So, which means and what for me it is related to the pattern recognition, and the students learn to recognize the pattern of the correct answer. Like, for example, let me give a specific example. I ask my students, which is undergraduate students who want to be teachers, right? Middle school teachers and elementary school teachers, like what scientific facts they know rather well. And it's actually coming, it's not my invention, it's coming from the wonderful documentary that's called Private Universe, when the same did with the graduates of the Harvard. They ask like similar questions. Although they usually ask not the questions that I ask, they usually ask questions about certain things. Like, but I already know more or less that majority of my students say that I know pretty well several things. One is scientific. Seasons. I can explain seasons. I can explain, for some reason they say, and I don't know, it's American education, they say we know phases of the moon. And usually the third thing they know pretty well, they say that Earth is round. And I usually challenge all three of them. By challenging, just ask, like, how do you know that? Or can you explain that? And majority of them do not know anything about these three things. Like, for example, I ask, like, how do we know that Earth is round? And the best answer they could produce, that if you go into the space, you can see that Earth is round. I said, yeah, but people knew about that long before. How they? And that's become it. The maximum they say it's written in the textbook. I said, what if they lie in textbook? Or how they came to that? They absolutely, they don't know. About seasons, they say, oh, it's very simple. Earth is close to the sun, it's summer. It's far from the sun, it is winter. I said, do you know about South Africa?
Yes.
I said, how come? And this is, they just stop. And they become almost like paralyzed. But the interesting thing is that these things are never discussed. Of course, with the moon, they will say, well, they draw, they say, are you cheating? This is, I know, I studied, I understood very well. And they draw that there is a sun, there is Earth and moon like related. But suddenly they couldn't explain phases of the moon versus sun eclipse. Because the moon will be every 30 days, or 29 days. The moon will be between sun and the Earth. And I said, so it means that there will be eclipse every 30 days. They, interesting enough, majority of them get very angry at me. And they get angry at me because they think that I'm tricking them. And I remember one class that was very dramatic because at some point they realized that I'm not tricking them. And they came to that and said, wait a minute, it means we know nothing about science. And I said, I have good news and bad news for you. And I said, which one do you want? I said, bad news. I said, the bad news, yeah, I agree with you. And they said, what's the good news? I said, well, good news, you have a life ahead of you to learn about that, if you're interested.
In a way, good news is that first when you recognize that you don't know something,
Yeah, and
you
yes,
can start to learn.
exactly. That's another sort of good news, yes.
I think I would like to talk to Alex.
Alex actually just said
Yeah.
a few things
Yeah.
before that.
Before that, first he
Uh-huh.
said disciplines are a matter of discourse. Where is this now? Shifted for me.
And terminology in the educational context.
Yeah. And then the use of terminology is the outer sign of learning, albeit not a very good one. Okay, I want to make a comment on that, and I don't know exactly what you meant, but I'm connecting to the second part of the use of terminology is the outer sign of learning, albeit not a very good one. There are many different levels. We can think that people can use terminology, and that in the best case is that they need some terms for something to say. In the worst case, we can think like a parrot, can say things without any knowledge, but they can even engage in some conversation. That provokes an interesting thinking, like whether there is really a dialogue, even when we don't know what people think. But I want to point out something else. There was one time when my nephew was about 3 or 4 years old. He said something very interesting. We were discussing with him, the two adults, me and my boyfriend at the time, something about animals, and I said something like animals, for example, a cat. And he said, my 4-year-old nephew, cat is not an animal. Okay, so we started then discovering like what I asked him, what's a cat? He said, and what is an animal? He said, lion is an animal. And I asked him, what's a giraffe? An animal. I asked him, what's a mouse? A mouse. And so slowly we started finding out what he understands animals are, and what these other things like cats and dogs and mice are. But using terminology doesn't mean that there is a learning. There is some kind of a interactive way when we may think that people are thinking the same thing or not, but just the use of terminology, I don't think is the guarantee of anything.
No, I actually may have an example about that because of my. We ask students to make an ethnography and use class terminology for that ethnography. That is our way to promote their understanding of the terminology. So there are several. What we have seen is that there are several ways of using it, but a lot of them, just as you were saying, they can just quote the terminology. Sometimes they, in the middle of their ethnography, they quote it, and it's like, what for? Like, it's not really connected what they are narrating. But the other way around, there are still at least two more. One is, I use terminology to talk about what I am seeing. That means it makes sense for you because you are using it for understanding what is happening. And the other way is using what is happening to change or to reflect on what the terminology means. And sometimes this even takes to a point that this for me now means something a little bit different than what I understood from the theory, you know. So there are terminology by itself It's just they are just brands, right? They are labels. Sorry, they are just labels. That these labels can be used in very different processes.
Right. And for different reasons.
Yeah, for different reasons.
And this is kind of, I was thinking about Bruno Latour, a French sociologist of science, and I think it's very useful, his notion of the ready-made science, in science in action. And in my view, terminology in this case belongs to ready-made science. It's tools, which is dead science. And that not necessarily bad sense of the dead, but this is it's with what you're doing science, but it's not science itself.
But it could, like in this conversation with my nephew, it became science because he and we started examining
but
this
that's already not terminology. You
open
open a black box,
Yes.
like you start saying, so what does it mean? Rather than the thing is, in my view, what's happened in school, the terminology exists as it's a pattern recognition. It's not even a tool, and it's masking. It's the same thing like Siri or Alexa for Amazon Alexa, not Alex, but Alexa, talks about that. It's like you're talking with machine, and from your point of view, it makes sense, but you know perfectly well that machine doesn't make any sense. Machine works with the patterns. And in my view, the same happened with the school. We teach students to recognize these patterns, and they can pass exam, solve the problems, although this is fake problems. The same thing as Alexa or calculator solve the problem. They're not solving any problems. They're using patterns, and patterns.
Inside some circuits click and...
Yes, and it's not that simple. It's not algorithmic sometimes. It's the pattern recognition is not based on algorithms that easily. There's a lot of probabilities involved. That's another story. But that's one thing. Another thing, what is, even if we say, Alex, accept that's as a sign of learning, terminology, is it learning education? Is it like learning to become a scientist, let's say? Is it anything to do with education? Or is just socialization or to profession? And this is a good, interesting question. What education is? Or maybe there's different versions of education. What considered education? Like there is training, even pattern recognition. Is it education or not? And pattern recognition is, I don't want to. It could be very useful. There's a lot of things. It's very useful to do recognize patterns, like train yourself to recognize patterns, whatever they mean. Both as a knowledge, as a skills recognition.
Well, it's very important for many professions to let's say, as a doctor, you have to recognize a pattern of certain symptoms to even start investigating. Is it true?
But in science, this is what Bruno Latour, returning back to him, that ready-made science is constantly part of science in action, because there are certain things you're using devices, you're using terminology, and you should do it unquestionably. Because if you start questioning everything,
you cannot stop.
Things start collapsing for you, because you cannot do much, you cannot move forward much. Because you're constantly thinking, like, what's animals, what this, what that, what's computer, how computer works, rather than using right now as a tool for us, assuming that it's working, right? In this case, it become a thing in itself.
And invisible for us.
Yes. As soon as it stopped working, like it unfortunately at the beginning of this podcast was, the black box is open, and we talk about, instead of dialogic pedagogy, what the hell going on, how to address that, and so on and so forth. We start opening that black box of what computer means, and that was not detrimental for our other purposes. By the way, we actually passed the 1 hour, and I think we should start
slowly closing. But we have 5 people. 5 people at the moment.
Yeah, well, and so
watching,
what?
Yes. And we want to just say, if anybody else has some idea, maybe.
Before we saying goodbye. And next time, I think, you know what, there are some people who live for some strange reason, on another side of the earth. I never could understand why they're doing that.
Yeah, in New Zealand, like, why would you?
Like, why would you live in New Zealand or China, or
Australia.
or even Russia
Yeah,
and some part of
very-
Russia. Or even
very
Europe
far.
is kind of strange place.
Strange place.
Yes, it's very far actually.
Right,
It's
like
not
what-
that far.
So being like a geographical centrist. Anyway, so a little bit decentralized. We talked with Charles Beasley to maybe for him to organize the next podcast, an inconvenient interactive podcast, and to make it very inconvenient for us. And in order to kind of respect people who, for some strange reason, live on another side of the earth. So maybe that's what we're going to do, and maybe they will take charge, since they will be awake much more than us, to take charge of that. I hope. Charles, if you listen to us or watch that later, this is your kind of, as in Russia we say, initiative is punishable by doing whatever you suggest. Okay, any other?
Veronica says thank you very much. Alex wants to come here like David. I thought,
Please. Oh,
Yeah.
I cannot see. Sorry. Wow, there is a lot of comments. Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that I need to move my
up, yeah,
up.
uh-huh. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So for the next time, what we will do? Okay. We need a very important thing. We would like to put again a poll for voting and writing in the topics. But if you're writing a new topic, please put your name next to it as sponsoring this topic, this person. So like we had some topics, but we don't know who suggested them, what they actually mean. And see, we always like to actually ask what you mean like, dialogically.
And Veronica, specifically for you, since you voted on the topic, very interesting topic, a lot of people wanted that topic about meaning making. Can you a little bit explain what you particularly want to us to discuss, or maybe you want to suggest, maybe you want to make some presentation about that or something. So can you write, please, on that? Maybe on that voting place.
No, we will
Or
create a new poll for the next week.
Yeah. So next time I think we will be in the mercy of Charles Beasley on another side of the earth and from New Zealand, and that will be probably open. I don't know how he wants to do that.
Or we'll pre-record something and post, and when Charles finalizes the poll, what the times are good for him and us, if we can find times that some of us can be at the same time together.
Yeah. Okay. So goodbye. Thank you for joining, and see you guys. Or I hope to see. Maybe we need next time to do Zoom. Let us know, because if you like Zoom or you like Facebook, this type of things, there are pluses and minuses in both of them. Bye.
Bye. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao, cacao.